Hello and welcome to WION's Global Leadership Series. Our guest today is a former president of Iran who refused to vote in the last election. He wanted to contest himself, but he was denied the opportunity, he says. Now, as the president-elect gears up to take charge, Iran is going through multiple crises. There's a major water shortage, power cuts, sky-high inflation. The Iranian economy has been in the doldrums. People are taking to the streets. How can Tehran get out of all of this in the middle of a pandemic? Also, how is its relationship with the US shaping up? Can it save the nuclear deal? What about the relationship with India? To discuss all of this and more, I'm joined today by Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran.
Thank you very much.
A new leader is taking charge of Iran. He's been endorsed today by the supreme leader of your country. President Ibrahim Raisi won the election by a landslide. What do you make of his election and the incoming government of your country?
Oh God, please hasten the advent of your Savior and bestow upon him health and triumph, and put us among those who spare no effort on his path. I say hello to you, your colleagues, and the lovely people of India. I wish all of you prosperity. And for the new Iranian government, I have in the past wished prosperity and success.
You wanted to contest this election yourself, but you were barred from contesting, barred from running, and I understand you did not even vote in this election. In an earlier interview, you've said, and I'm quoting, that you will not participate in the election if the will of the millions of people is denied for no legitimate reason, like it has been in the past. Do you think that this new government under President Raisi represents the will of the people of Iran?
Everywhere, things are based on people, and the energy that propels the country and takes it forward is the will of the people. And if people are not there, no positive development is going to occur. The governments are entitled to nothing but propelling and developing the will of the people.
I agree. And yet I repeat my question. Do you think that this new government represents the will of the people of Iran?
I made my reply.
What are the challenges, do you believe, that the Iranian leadership faces and should be their priority?
Right now, both the economic situation and social situation is in a dire one, and also relations with neighbors and international relations are facing serious challenges. And above all, the distrust in the public.
Distrust of whom?
Of the public.
Who do they not trust?
People. They don't trust the managers and decision makers.
Of Iran?
The answer is clear.
So you're saying that the people of Iran do not trust the decision makers of the country. I'm assuming that means the government. The people of Iran are also protesting. We've been reporting on major crises unfolding in Iran, a serious water shortage, power cuts, people taking to the streets, and some of them have been fired upon by the security forces. What do you make of the situation?
The most important issue is the restoration of the national trust, which needs to occur.
Of course, restoration of trust is very, very important. So would be the restoration of economy, wouldn't you say? Iran's economy has been crippled by American sanctions. The pandemic has now pushed Iran towards the third consecutive year of recession. How do you see all of these problems playing out politically?
Yes, over the past few years, the Iranian economy has not been well managed. The Iranian economy is a powerful one. We are a big nation with lots of amenities and facilities, and also empowered human resources. Of course, the pandemic and the COVID have been important. But all of these put their effect when weak management is enforced upon the economy and social conditions.
How do you assess the impact of the pandemic on Iran? And do you think the government has done a good job in ensuring that the impact is minimal?
Unfortunately, the government's management of the pandemic has been very, very bad. And today we have public dissatisfaction because of this. I.e., above the COVID, the weak management has damaged Iran's economy.
The world is watching how President-elect Raisi is going to take forward the ongoing negotiations to restore the Iran nuclear deal. What's your advice to him?
I think any negotiations, if they're supposed to succeed, should be based on justice and respect. The previous negotiations, due to having set aside these rules and these principles, have not been able to resolve anything.
According to the UN atomic watchdog, Tehran has begun the process of producing enriched uranium. Why is Tehran violating the terms of agreement despite, they say, the willingness of the United States to negotiate?
Issues always have two parties and two sides, whether being agreements or commitments. So if both parties, both sides are committed to their obligation, it's going to win. Otherwise, it's doomed to failure. The understanding of the other parties which are negotiating Iran is that only Iran has got commitments and they don't have any. And this worsens the situation. And the secret to the failure of the JCPOA or the nuclear deal is that it's an absolutely unilateral deal. So the obligations are on the side of Iran and the interests are on the side of the other party. And that's why it's not been able to succeed.
Is Iran meeting its commitments?
In the first round, Iran did, but it was not actually entitled its benefits. So it didn't use its benefits.
So now it's not?
All right, that's upon the atomic energy officials. My job is to provide a political analysis. I think overall the issue, the nuclear issue, is a political one rather than a technical one.
You've also been a vocal critic of this nuclear deal, and you've believed that, or you've said that it has caused more problems. Do you believe that this deal is worth saving?
I think if fundamental reforms based on justice and respect are made, then it can be a good deal. But if not, it's going to yield no fruit and it's not going to bear any results.
You've said in the past that US President Joe Biden should, quote unquote, use this chance to work with Iran and solve outstanding issues. He came to office in January. It's been 7 months. Do you think he's using this chance?
In my letter to Mr. Biden, I said that the U.S. policies are determined by some other people. But as the president, he's got the chance to do his best to bring about changes. And I asked him to utilize the chance and make reforms or changes in the U.S. foreign policy and bring about reforms to the benefit of justice and respect for everybody, and also including Iran. So this could reform the relationships. But I think over the past 7 months, we haven't seen any serious change.
Let's discuss what's happening in the region. In its final days, the Trump administration was the driving force behind the Abraham Accords, which is a series of agreements, as you would know, that normalize ties between Israel and some of the Arab countries like the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco and others. The new administration seems to be in support of these agreements. In fact, it, quote unquote, wants to continue to urge other countries to normalize relations with Israel. What should be Iran's response if more Arab nations normalize ties with Israel?
I think the issue is clear. The main problem is the issue of Palestine, not the relationships between Arab countries and the Zionist regime. And as long as the issue of Palestine has not been resolved, the problem will persist. The issue of Palestine is that there is a nation whose land has been occupied, whose national sovereignty has been shed and violated. Several million people have become refugees. And this is the problem which needs to be resolved. And basically, fundamentally, the issue of Palestine has got nothing to do with the Zionist regime's relations with some of the Arab nations, countries of the Persian Gulf, that is the littoral states. And in fact, some of these countries actually came to the map, to the globe map, after the issue of Palestine. So the problem is that of the Palestinian nation. They need to be allowed to freely determine their own fate. And if this is resolved, the problem would be resolved. Otherwise, this is not going to bear fruit any kind for for Palestine. And in fact, in the issue of Palestine, this is giving the wrong address.
So let me, for my own understanding, are you suggesting that the normalization of ties with Arab countries has nothing to do with the issue of Palestine? Or are you saying that this normalization undermines the Palestinian cause, as you put it? And should Iran, be worried about what's happening in the region vis-a-vis Israel and its Arab neighbors?
I think it's no important issue. It is not as much it is being promoted important, and it's not effective in resolving the issue of Palestine. This is changing the problem of Palestine, and it's not going to help resolve it. If it is going to be resolved, it should be based on justice, and that the right to determining the fate of the Palestinian nation needs to be recognized by the world.
Both Israel and Iran are seeing a leadership transition, and there's a hardline leadership taking power in both these countries. Do you expect tension to escalate?
I think the situation is not a good one, and efforts need to be made to reduce tensions and that the regional issues be resolved and balance on tranquility and peace.
Do you think there is a political will on either side to make these efforts?
I think now there is no will, but there should be.
Another developing story in the region is Afghanistan. Iran is trying to play the role of a mediator in Afghanistan. First of all, how do you assess the way things are going?
I think the situation in Afghanistan is both to the detriment of the Afghan nation and also to that of all the regional nations. Anybody who is willing to help should do their best to ensure that the will of the Afghan nation is implemented. And this is going to occur when the real representatives of the Afghan nation make the decisions. Agreement between groups does not bring about any peace, but rather it is a dividing of power. What brings about peace, tranquility, and security is the enforcement of the public will of the Afghan nation and their neighboring regional countries, and also ultra-regional states should not meddle in the issues and in the affairs, but they should help enforce the will of the Afghan people.
You said that neighbors should not meddle and enforce the will of the Afghan people. I want to know which neighbors, according to you, are meddling.
All of the neighbors.
Including Iran?
Yes, Iran, Pakistan, India, China, and the Persian Gulf countries, NATO, and Russia. None of them should meddle in the Afghan nation's affairs.
Do you think talking to the Taliban and striving towards this peace deal was a good idea, legitimizing the Taliban? When you say that the will of the Afghan people, some say that the Taliban are also Afghan people. Others say that the Taliban are not a legitimate entity, political entity.
The people of Afghanistan should elect their representatives, and none of these groups are the representatives of the people of Afghanistan. And this is only possible through a free election. If any group takes weapons and attacks and occupies some parts, cannot consider themselves the representative of the nation, and also and entitled to rights. If we accept this kind of logic, then we will be accepting that the entire world would always be unstable, and whoever is more violent would be dominant. Then rights and laws would be meaningless.
I agree. In an ideal world, there should be election, but the situation in Afghanistan is not conducive to holding an election, as you would be aware. Do you believe that the American withdrawal, and a botched-up withdrawal, as we've been calling it, has pushed Afghanistan towards another civil war?
If the U.S. and others don't support the Taliban by providing weapons and also providing logistic, financial, and promotion-wise in regard to the Taliban, then the Taliban would not be able to endanger the security of Afghanistan. And if the Americans and others go away and keep out of this, problems would more quickly be resolved. I believe that the Americans have, in practice, not gone out of the region. And in fact, they have a new plot has been designed, and they are supporting the Taliban. And in the near future, the Taliban will resort to the slogan of the Great Khorasan and bring about a war and conflict to the entire region.
You're saying the Americans are supporting the Taliban?
It is definitely so. And in fact, the Taliban is part of the American plot.
What do you make of Pakistan's role? The government in Kabul has been accusing Pakistan of supporting Taliban terrorists as they try to take control of the territory.
What I said is addressing everybody. All those who are supporting the Taliban should know that if the Taliban is settled down and takes power, they would soon revolt against themselves and endanger their security.
Is that for Pakistan?
Yes, surely it is. Anybody in any part of the world who considers themselves as the basis and the symbol of a religion and tries to force upon others its will by weapons and arms is going to be a serious threat and danger to all nations and countries.
What happens in Afghanistan, of course, has a bearing on the region. India accelerated work on the Chabahar port in the month of April. It's a facility that serves a vital trade link between India, Iran and Afghanistan. Do you believe that the growing violence and instability in Afghanistan is going to hurt the shared economic interests and security interests of India and Iran?
Yes, usually war and conflict is going to have its negative effects on all sectors. And my understanding is that the relations between Iran and India are so strong that with the expediency of the two countries, these consequences, the aftermath, the outcomes of such issues and the joint projects are going to be set off and neutralized and also controlled.
As President of Iran, you visited India and you pushed for what was called the peace pipeline. How do you see the relationship between Tehran and New Delhi as of today?
I think we belong to a joint cultural domain, and our areas for proximity are very, very much. So the volume of communications that we have today compared to our capacity and commonalities is extremely small. And as a fundamental strategy, we need to do our best to ensure that we utilize the maximum available capacity. We love the people of India very much. When we travel to India, we feel we are at home. The people of India are extremely intimate. They are extremely lovely. They are so kind and also justice-seeking. And the cultural proximities are shared among the two nations and are very deep.
Do you believe the new administration is going to take forward ties with India?
I think it's a strategy that the two countries need to pursue, and there's no other way except this.
Under Hassan Rouhani, Iran made a major foreign policy shift, elevating its ties with Beijing. There was a $400 billion accord that was signed that dictates the roadmap of Iran's relationship with China for the next 25 years. Do you think that will have a bearing on Iran's relationships with other partners, including India?
In Iran, there's been a lot of debate over that contract, and it's ongoing. I think that the potential of cooperation between Iran and India is much more than what the capacity of the contract between Iran and China is now being discussed.
So how do you see this growing proximity with China?
In relationships, it is the basis that all nations and countries have relations with each other and utilize the maximum potential. But I believe that the capacity that exists between Iran and India is much higher than relationships with other countries.
Chinese investment in various countries has been met with skepticism and increasing debt. Do you think that's a threat that Iran should worry about?
As I said before, in any agreement, justice and respect should be observed, and the rights of the two parties should be balanced. Regarding the China deal, no clear information has been published in Iran, and that's why the Iranian people look at it with doubt.
Interesting. You're a politician, but you speak like a diplomat. Nonetheless, it was a pleasure talking to you, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Thank you very much for being with us.
Please convey my warm and special greetings to the lovely people of India.